Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to Do Station with another video. I hope you are good, you are doing good, you are learning well, and my efforts are helping you guys. We are doing our series, we are learning HSE from beginner to expert level in very easy way. We already have completed our two modules. First one was Introduction to Health and Safety, and the second one was Fundamental Concepts in Health and Safety. Now, we will start the third module in which we will look into the key legislations, regulations, and standards related to health and safety. We will see what they are, how they work, and what are our responsibilities under these laws. So, I have divided this module into three parts. In the first part, we will see what they are, what are these legislation and standards, and how they work, and what is compliance and what is non-compliance, and what can be the consequences or implications of the non-compliance. In the second part, we will cover, we will see, look into which are the most globally accepted and practiced standards and regulations. Then in the third part, we will see what are our responsibilities, especially for the employers and employees under these laws. And we will look into some case studies to understand and how they practically implicate, or what can be the implications if we non-comply with them. So let's start today's topic, which is basically what are these legislations, regulations, and how they work. Welcome to presentation, everyone. Today we will discuss health and safety legislations, regulations, and frameworks. And it's part one. It is basically we will cover the overview of these regulations and frameworks. Basically, it is a part of the series we are doing on HSE ABC to XYZ with Dr. Do start from the scratch, in which we are understanding the HSE from the beginner to expert level. So let's look into the introduction of today's discussion we are going to do. So we will cover basically health and safety legislations and framework, which are the essential and crucial part to ensure that our health and safety is effectively managed on our organizations and we avoid any sort of harm to our worker, business, or the environment. Basically, these regulations or frameworks related to HSE let us implement the HSE in effective and more progressive way. And also at the same time, they identify the responsible persons or responsibilities within an organization which are responsible to ensure the HSE is effectively maintained or implemented. Also at the same time, they give us the criteria or the regarding the accountabilities of those if we fail or someone fails to fulfill the obligations law under the law or under by the standards he is supposed to do. So in case he will have to face the consequences or there can be the implication. So that is why for for all of the HSE practitioners at any level, it is very important to have a very good understanding of these legislations. They should know what they are, how they work, and what is their role, where they fit in, so they can avoid any sort of implications that may come across just due to the negligence, or maybe just because you have no idea how the laws work there regarding the HSE. So that is why it is very important to have a good understanding about the legislation. So in the today's topic, we will see the overview of what these laws or these regulations or legislations and frameworks are related to HSE. So in today's topic overview of HSE regulations and standards, we will cover introduction to HSE legislation and standards. And then classification of these regulations and standards, we can classify them as a criminal laws. We will understand what they are, civil laws, guidelines, HSE related standards, HSE standards, and international laws. Then we will look into the industry best practices and importance of HSE compliance. Then know what may be the implications of the non-compliance with these standards and regulations. So now let's look into the introduction to HSE regulations and standards. Basically, these are set of rules, guidelines, and principles aimed at protecting workers and public and the environment from the hazard and risk associated with the organization's activity. So basically, these are rules and regulations or the established framework of the HSE related to HSE that we adopt or we have to adopt to ensure that our people, public, and environment is protected from the harmful impacts of the organization's activity. Also, they let us ensure that health and safety is implemented effectively. Before understanding, let's define these terminologies one by one. So, what are legislations and acts? These are laws passed by the government or legislative body to establish a framework for the HSE. Basically, the legislations and the acts are the laws related to HSE, which are intended to ensure that health and safety is implemented effectively, and the people and everything is protected effectively. So governments or officials or authorities will make the laws that once the law is passed, then it is mandatory for everyone to follow those laws. And if we fail to follow them, then it is a crime and there may be the consequences. So the legislations related to HSE passed by the government or legislators becomes the laws related to HSE, then we have to follow them. So then comes the regulations, basically rules or standards created by the regulatory body to implement the legislation effectively. So basically these are government bodies, regulatory bodies basically. Once the law is passed, then after that to implement them effectively, government makes the bodies which are called regulatory bodies. They are empowered to ensure that these laws or legislation related to HSE are implemented effectively. So these body basically give us the rules. First of all, they provide us the interpretation of the law. Then they give us the any clarification which are required. Then they give us information, instruction, and any rules and regulations and sometimes frameworks, comprehensive frameworks, so we can follow these laws. So all these rules or the regulations that these bodies develop and share with us are called regulations. And also they also establish the mechanism for monitoring, so they can find who is complying and who is not complying, so they can make them accountable. So now let's look into the standards. Establish guidelines or set of actions to establish effective framework for the HSE. So basically, these are not laws until they are regulated by the regulatory bodies or embedded into our legal system, but they are globally accepted practice. They are tested and trusted for long period of time, and their effectiveness is appreciated globally. So these systems standards basically called health and safety management system. They basically let us manage our health and safety in structured and systematic way, resulting in more effective and sustainable management of the health and safety. And also at the same time, they let us continuously improve our health and safety with the passage of time. So these are called standards. So now let's conclude or understand how they work together. First of all, they provide us the consideration that must be taken into account. They may be the development of the procedure, policy, standards. Then they set the boundaries that must be respected or followed, like actions or rules, maybe this development of the risk assessment (PTW) or the competency level, minimum requirement for the competencies. Also, then they give us the guidance, they give us the information, interpretation, information, instructions, comprehensive guidelines, even the procedures or frameworks to follow these legislations and laws. And at the same time, they identify the responsibilities at different level of the organization, like who is the responsible for what, and their criteria for their accountability. So in case of any failure, what will be the consequences? And at last, they basically monitor and enforce the law. They go to the organization, they inspect, they send their representative, they inspect the organizations. If there is any sort of non-compliance, then they can make you the accountable for those things. So now let's look how we classify these legislations and standards. Classification of HSE laws. Basically, we can classify them as criminal laws, civil laws, HSE related guidelines, HSE related standards or systems, and then international laws. Let's understand them one by one. So let's understand the criminal laws. Statute is enacted by the parliament to regulate and enforce HSE standards. Basically, these are intended to make sure that health and safety is effectively implemented. Legislations, parliament passes the laws health and safety at work act 1974. So basically these laws are basically legislations passed by the parliament. Once they are passed, then they become the law and they become the legal obligation for anyone who is working under the jurisdiction of those authorities of the country. Then the regulations, basically regulatory bodies create the regulations to enforce the health and safety law. So government makes the regulatory bodies to make sure laws related to health and safety are implemented effectively. So these regulatory bodies develop the regulations that help any organization to ensure they implement the laws effectively. Then enforcement, these regulatory bodies make sure that these laws are implemented. They inspect the workplaces, then they check the compliance. If there is non-compliance, then obviously there can be consequences. You can be accountable. Uh, Prosecutions like non-compliant organization or individual can be maybe prosecuted into the courts. And then there can be fines, penalties. Organizations can very significant fines, even prohibition or the closure of the business also. Then imprisonment, uh, responsible person can go to the prison. Then reputation damage, obviously, if you are not following the laws, you are violating them, then there can be the reputational consequences and your business can suffer financially. These criminal laws basically focus on the principle of the deterrence and the punishment. So everyone follow them. So now let's look into the civil law. Civil laws provide protection coverage for the individuals affected by the HSE related incidents. So these are basically civil right laws for anyone who is affected by the organization's undertaking. He can go to the civil court and put the claim so he can get the compensation against any harm or losses he sustained. In the civil law, judges develop the civil law principles through the court decisions. Once the case is put, claim is put into the court, then judges look into it and then they give the decision. Now this decision is called precedent, and this becomes the law. And then in the future, similar cases it will be used. In the civil law, the affected party or claimant have to go to the put the claim, and then he has to prove the case. He has to prove that there was a duty of the care on the duty holder that was breached, and due to which he sustained the harm or loss, so compensate him, give him the compensation. So if it is proved that there was a duty of breach and the judges see that it was breached, so organization can be liable for breaching the contractual obligations and they have to pay the different cost. Now this decision basically depends on the principle of balance of the probabilities in which judges look at how much role of the duty holder was there in the harm. If it is, let's say, 60%, then obviously the compensation will be as per the 60%. But if it is 100%, then obviously the compensation amount will increase. So once it is established that there was a breach of duty, so there may be the compensation cost that organization have to bear. Then there can be the other expenses like civil claims that can be big lump sum amounts, or the legal fees, the legal firm you organization hired for the case defense. So these are the costs. Also, injunction courts can issue the injunctions to stop the organization from the continuous hazardous activities. Also, maybe their court find that there are some hazardous activities that are being carried out without protection or effective HSE. So maybe they can even close the business or they can stop the activity that cause the harm. Then obviously there can be the reputational damages. Maybe you can lose the business. It can impact you financially. The focus of the civil law is basically compensation, as the focus of the criminal law was the deterrence as the punishment. But here in the civil law, the focus is to compensate anyone who is affected by the undertaking of the organization. Then there is another term, contributory negligence. Victim contributed to the harm on negligence. If a judge finds that the court finds that the victim was also responsible, even then he will get the compensation, but the compensation will be reduced as per his role into the harm. So now let's understand what are the guidelines, HSE related guidelines. Non-binding, not legally enforceable, but rather provide guidance on the best practices. Basically, these are the recommendation, advices, or even the frameworks which are not mandatory or legal bounding on us, but we follow them or adopt them just because to achieve some level of the compliance. They may be the official or non-official. Official are basically those which come from the legal body, official bodies like regulatory bodies, and non-official are basically those who come from the industrial standard or non-organizational bodies like ISO, International Standard Organization. So these are basically the best practices which are being adopted or practiced in the globally. So we can also adopt them to make sure that we also improve our health and safety. So they can be the recommendatory, flexible, or informative. So recommendatory are those basically which are already tested and trusted and being practiced all over the world globally. So we can adopt them, like the HSE UK basically recommends that sufficient breaks should be there for those who are working with the computer displays. Similarly, the ACGI recommends that TLBs for those who are exposing to the or may expose to the hazardous substances, so they give the limits value to control the health impacts. Similarly, there are flexible recommendations. Basically, these are the tailored form we can take like as standards, ISO standards. We can adopt them. If we do not take the certification and we do not implement them officially, then they are guidelines for us, and we can adopt them and we can tailor them. ISO standards can be tailored as per our requirements. Similarly, HSE guidelines for specific risk assessments. We can modify them, tailor them as per our requirements. Similarly, there are informative guidelines basically that provide some information or guidance related to HSE matters or basically for improvements usually. Like you have already adopted a system or the standard, but there is you get information that there is another system that you can adopt which is more suitable for you. So these are basically such guidelines are called informative guidelines. So now let's understand what are the standards. HSE standards are established frameworks that provide established mandatory and specific set of requirements that outline what is expected to ensure HSE performance. Basically, HSE standards are a health and safety management system or frameworks related to HSE, which are established, tested, and trusted, globally accepted and practiced, and their effectiveness is appreciated globally. So basically, these are comprehensive systems which let us manage health and safety in structured and systematic way, resulting in more effective and sustainable and continuously improving health and safety management. So let's see some of their characteristics. Basically, are mandatory. HSE standards are legally enforceable and must be complied with. Maybe if they are regulated by the regulatory bodies or the embedded in our legal system, then they are legal obligation, or maybe the requirement of the clients. So even then, they become the obligation. So our for the continuity of the business, they are very specific. Always outline specific requirements which are required. Then they are measurable. They have indicators that let us know the quantify the level of compliance or the performance HSE performance we are getting. Then they are very consistent. They give us consistent approach. With the passage of time, they become more mature and mature, and making our health and safety more effective. Implications: we can lose the certification or accreditation that can cause loss of the business. Damage to the reputation, financial losses, regulatory actions if they are the part of the legal system, obviously, or regulated by the regulatory bodies, then there can be the legal consequences. Also, if due to the non-compliance, if there is an incident, so even then we can face the legal consequences. Now let's understand international law. Not laws, rather standards and conventions and treaties. Basically, we don't have any globally harmonized system that is lawfully enforceable in all the regions of the globe. But we have international standards which are very effective, globally accepted practice. From the ISO, IEC, we have comprehensive, very effective conventions, recommendations from ILO. Then we have the guidelines on the health and safety matters, which are very comprehensive and very effective from the different bodies like WHO, OSHA, and Health and Safety Executive UK. So all these standards, recommendations, conventions, and guidelines, we call them international law, which are globally accepted and practiced. They play a very crucial role in promoting and making health and safety effective. They give us consistency, globally accepted and robust. They give us the global consensus, efficiency is increased, effectiveness is increased, and they are financially supported. As the experts from the all over the world are responsible to develop them, and also the technologies available all in the different regions of the world, we benefit from them. So the experts with the diverse perspective and competencies and all the technologies available in the different regions, so these systems of standards become very robust, very effective and efficient. So now let's understand, when we say that these are not laws lawfully enforceable, then how we achieve the effectiveness, or how we make sure that they are globally implemented. So for that, basically governments or the authorities which are responsible to the ensure the health and safety in the different regions, and the international customer or the client basically play the crucial role. First, the governments or the authorities in the different regions, they adopt the internationally famous or practiced laws or standards. They make them the part of their legislations, or they let their regulatory bodies to regulate these laws, so that it becomes the legal obligation for the people or the organizations which are operating under their jurisdiction. Also, the international clients or the customers, they make the conditions for their clients to make sure that they implement or adopt these standards or the laws to ensure the health and safety is effectively implemented. Otherwise, they will not give the business. So these two factors basically are the big contributor to ensure that these international laws and the standards are globally accepted and practiced effectively. So now let's understand what are industry best practices. These are basically established methods and techniques that have proven to be effective in health and safety risk management. So basically, best practices are the method being practiced in the industry, and they are very successful, and we can also benefit from them. How? Number one comes the benchmarking. We compare our performance with the industry leader or the competitor whose performance is better than us, and we also want to achieve that level. So how we do that? We compare our accident rates with them. We compare our procedure with them, like trainings, how they do, what they do, then risk assessments or other procedures. So we can compare with them and we can get benefits from them. Then research and development, big companies basically make their department for the research and development for the new innovations. And there are different organizations or bodies like NIOSH, API, whose sole responsibility is to do the research and development in health and safety related issues. So we can get help from them. Then there is the lesson learned. We can learn the lesson from the past incidents, maybe in our organization or the other organization. So we can learn what happened there, what went wrong, or then how we can avoid the reoccurrence. So these are the lesson learned, are the techniques we can use to improve our health and safety. Then there is the collaboration work. Basically, in the industry, we can collaborate with other partners or the bodies like OSHA to resolve or the make our health and safety more effective. Now let's understand the importance of HSE compliance. First of all, it is legal and social obligations to ensure that our worker, public environment, and business is protected from the harmful impacts of the activity due to the activities of the organization. Otherwise, we will have to face the severe consequences. And also, if we comply with the standards and we achieve the compliance, then we will reduce the risk of accident injuries. We will save the cost, we will protect the environment, our reputation will increase, our brand value will increase. Also, cost savings, different types of costs, we will avoid them. Efficiency and productivity will improve, profit will increase as we will get more business. Regulatory compliance, obviously, legal consequences that may come across, we will avoid them. So now let's understand the non-compliance implications. The legal implications may include the prosecution, fines, imprisonment. Maybe you need to go to the you have to go to the jail. Then civil liability claims, employee or the third party. Then financial implications that can impact you financially: increased insurance premiums, high risk organizations have to pay high rates, lost productivities maybe due to the workers are not available, he's on hospital or on the leave. Reputation damage, maybe you lose your customer. Then operational implications, you have to face the downtime due to maybe accidents and injuries. Now workers not available again. Equipment is damaged, not in use. Then environmental damage, you are busy in the cleanup operations. So this may impact your operational functionalities. Then human implications that will deteriorate your organizational culture, like employee morale will be down. They will be in the stress and anxiety, or they can face the serious health issues like trauma, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders. So maybe they are facing the very serious health issues. So your organizational culture will be deteriorated. So now we covered our topics. Let's conclude what we learned. HSE regulations and standards basically set of rules or the frameworks that help us make sure that our health and safety is managed effectively. Criminal laws, basically statutes passed by the parliament. We have to follow them, otherwise we will have to face the legal implications. Civil laws, precedents, basically compensation based. If someone is affected, maybe we have to compensate them. There are another costs which are associated with it. Then guidelines, basically the best practices. We have options to adopt them to achieve the compliance levels, standards, mandatory or systems or frameworks that we have to adopt maybe due to the legal obligations or the client requirements. International laws, basically not legally enforceable globally, but they give the standards, treaties which are globally accepted and practiced, tested and trusted to make sure that our health and safety is effectively managed. Industry best practices are the techniques or the we can adopt to make sure that our health and safety is improved, or we want to improve our health and safety, which include benchmarking, research and development, the lesson learned, and collaboration. Then comes the importance and the consequences. Importance because we want to avoid any sort of legal complications, consequences, and we want to ensure that our people are safe, our business is safe, and our environment is safe. So that was it for today. I hope that will be helpful for you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. Any suggestions, any questions, you can share it with me. Until next video, stay safe and healthy. Until Allah Hafiz.